JR, welcome to HR Heretics. Thanks for coming.
So Thanks, excited team. To have you.
I'm super happy to be here today. Really excited. Big fan.
All right. So I think you and Kelly are work wives and have been working together, from what I can tell, for like the last 8 years. Like, Kelly, JR, what is the story of your relationship and how did it come to be?
Yeah.
Go ahead. You want to go first?
I think that's appropriate. No, you start, my friend. You start.
Yeah, I mean, I think I knew of Kelly, like a lot of people, right, before I actually knew her specifically. I think when I got to Yahoo, I'd heard her name. She was already gone by that point. And ultimately, I honestly think I got to know her because she was the CPO of a vendor that I was going to be using. So we were big Hired fans back in the day at Looker. And I remember they sent me like this Jambox speaker and like some bottle of like Dom. And I'm like, who are these people? I love them. Sell me more software, you know? And so then I found out that Kelly was there and made the connection at that point. How we came to work together was, I always recommend this. If you have the opportunity to hire your own boss, reach for the stars with that one, and we had an opening for a chief people officer at Looker. And there were some folks who really thought I should take the job, right? They said, well, what about you? Why not you? And I had said at the time, and had for a long time, a lot of people really wanted that job for me. They really wanted me. They wanted me to want the job because they wanted it for me. And, I didn't want it then. I just didn't. Like, I felt like my lane was wide enough. I had enough to do. I enjoyed my team. I have been a recruiter for over 20 years, right? I'm really fucking good at it. And I like it, right? And I thought that was just the answer. And I thought it was the right thing for the company, actually, at that moment in time, more importantly. I came in as a director, and I think I would have been seen a certain way. I was a VP by that point, but I really felt like they needed someone that they could look to, respect, listen to, because they had been there and done that. It was more important for Looker for that. So I remember Patty McCord, like literally looking me square in the eye and being like, why are you going to hire her? Like, why not you? And I was like, thanks,
amen, Patty.
Yeah, right. And so it was great, right? So I've known Patty for years, and she's always a truth teller at all times. And so that was how it started. And then we went through the journey together of getting onboarded to Google. We have a great photo of us in our goofy little propeller hats, which is a legendary photo. And then, my time, I was on that fixed term contract, which I always say, boy, if you can get that, like, take it and run. What a great deal. And I loved my time at Google. I worked with a guy named Nick Hepton. He was just an amazing partner, treated me like I was a peer. It was really a great time, but my time was coming to an end, and I knew I wanted to finish what I started at Looker. Like, we kind of got cut off, and I wanted to take a company like beyond that 1,000 employee mark and keep going. And so I told Kelly that I was going to leave and not try to stay at the end of my contract. And we just started, talking about what that could look like, right? I did a couple of interviews for some executive recruiter friends to me to be a calibration candidate. I was like, boy, you owe me a lot for that, because this is like, talked to a few companies that I didn't really even want to work at, but it was good for, sharpening the skills. It had been a while since I'd actually really interviewed. And then Kelly said, hey, I'm consulting with the CEO that we know through the portfolio from some of our Looker investors. He wants to talk to you about recruiting and your point of view on recruiting. And I said, great. So I had a call with Todd, our CEO at Pendo, and I thought it was just he wants to talk to me about my point of view on recruiting. And I told him I never really interviewed for the job. He's like, what are you talking about? We had that call. And I was like, oh, I had no intention, right? Like that was an interview. But it went from there. And so Kelly and I started like a week apart or so. And
wow,
it's been awesome.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were ships in the night at Yahoo. Like, technically we've been working together for, I don't know, over 10 years, but not, because I didn't even really talk to JR until 2016 at Hired after the Dom and the speakers. Now that wasn't quite the sign-on bonus of the purple Jeeps at Yahoo, but that was pretty damn good.
Yeah, right.
these days. And we just hit it off, you know, and then she called me around Looker. I said, same thing Patty said. I'm like, why the hell are you calling me? Why don't you take the job? And then, of course, Patty's like, just take the job to me. So Patty, you know, she continues to be this
All angles.
All angles. And I did. And, you know, it's incredible when you find someone that you work so well with, but that also complements what you're not good at. Right. Like I often refer to JR and I as yin and yang. Like what I'm not good at, she's very good at. And what she's not as strong at, I help with. And that is such a powerful force if you can find that. And the thing I will say though, the thing that makes it work, is there has never been 1 ounce of fucking ego in any of it. Like Jared, I don't want the jobs. We're not trying to climb anything. We're trying to give away and work together. And so I do believe that is the secret sauce of these relationships, is literally having no ounce of this is my toy or this is your toy or this is my turf, this is your turf. It's all one. And that's what made it work from the very beginning. And what I told JR, I said, you got to talk to Todd and I'm going to go do this. It might be my last one for at least a while, if not for a couple years. And you got to come with me and do it because they need you and I need you. And then you're going to take the job in like 2 or 3 years. And it's going to be great.
And I was like, yeah, right.
She was like, well, I'm like, come on, it's going to be fun. We'll continue the Looker journey. We'll finish it. And then you'll take this thing over once we build it. And the reason I thought of her, not just because I enjoy working with her, but I will tell you that it scared the shit out of me when Todd and Jennifer Kalin, our CFO, was like, you know, we are growing at 60% year over year. This was over 3 years ago. We need to literally hire like 650 people a year net to continue this growth. And it is the single biggest thing that our board is concerned about. It is the number one reason that we might not hit our goals. And I was like, I can't do this with anyone else but JR because she's the best talent acquisition leader in the business. And I wouldn't have gone if she didn't come because that was so important. And it's an area that I don't know. I did not come from recruiting. I am a org culture freak. I am not a recruiter. And that is one thing. If you don't have great lieutenants around you in this CPO role in areas that you're not great at, you're dead.
What's interesting for me with both of you guys is the self-awareness. So Kelli, you're talking about like, I'm not good at recruiting. That's not what my skill set is. JR, you had the opportunity potentially to fight to be the chief people officer at Looker and you didn't. Like, that's really hard, right? I mean, especially if you've been in the business and, you know, like people are telling you you should be the person. And I think candidly, like when you have a lot of the insider baseball with relationships, that actually does help you do the job better than an outsider potentially could.
Yep.
Why not push for it then? Maybe said differently, what's the difference between you in CPO seat now versus you pushing for the CPO seat then?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You know, I would be remiss to not say I was probably scared a little bit. I mean, that's very real. There was a lot that I didn't know. And, you know, if it had come down to hiring someone other than Kelli or me, you might have seen me fight for it at that point, right? Like if I knew that we could get her, then I was fine right where I was. And we were still growing quite a bit at that point. So I also think that now, fast forward, and it's over 3 years later, going into the 4th year, and I felt ready, right? Yeah. I felt ready. I had relationships built up at the company. I had accomplished what I'd set out to accomplish kind of from that scale perspective during the kind of boom time, right? I got the team established and the culture from a recruiting point of view established. And I was probably, you know, thinking about, oh, okay, we're going to go through and do this again. And I wanted to be in the room at that point. I was like, you know, damn it. Like I want to be in there now. So that's
and you got to learn from Kelli. I think it's a good lesson for our audience that, you know, there's a couple of different ways to learn.
Yeah.
One way to learn is just to go do it and to figure it out while you're on the job. That was basically my career path. And then the other way is that you can go learn from somebody that you admire. I think the thing that often happens, especially in this role, is you get layered with somebody that you don't admire. And that's where I think it gets really challenging. And so for you to have a hand in that process, I think is unique and a potential lesson for number twos and number threes, as they help pick. It's like, yeah, get somebody that you really admire and lean into that. And also a lesson for CEOs that people do have the self-awareness to say, I can learn from this person and they're good for our business, versus big company, whoever, who's going to come in and, pull all the puppet strings and not do any of the real work.
Yeah. Nolan, you said get someone in that you admire to learn from. And I actually feel really strongly about this. And I think this is the secret sauce, is I would reframe that to learn with. It is not learn from. Like, we were very fucking explicit and intentional on day one that usually we were in the same room. Yeah, right. We would have one-on-ones with Todd together around things that connected culture and hiring. And it's not just this hierarchical learn from, it's literally learn with, to a point where 14 months into Pendo, we were literally interchangeable. Yeah. And that is something that I have rarely seen in companies. Like, hey, come into C-suite with me. Let's attack this together. And not just your successor, but anyone that you're trying to teach, learn, share. That is a non-egotistical way of working that I think a lot of folks forget that you can actually architect. You can create that environment. And I do believe that's how we were able to fast track this. And it honestly made it easier the last 3 years, just in general, in working. So it's that learn with that I think is just something that I haven't seen a lot out there. And I'd love to see more of it. HR agnostic or not, it doesn't matter.
Me too.
I hope people listen and learn from it. And I know this isn't a toot Kelly's horn podcast,
don't
right?
Put this in. I don't
Definitely not.
Yeah. Don't put that in.
That's not what we're here to do.
Let's shit on me for a few minutes.
Could do that too. I was really mad at her part of the times. I was really mad at her for some of the stuff she made me do, right? She'd be like, oh, that looks like I'm going to be in Tahiti during that board meeting. Or no, just kidding.
I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
No, first of all, you can cut it out, but no, we're not kidding, because that was her way too of, she politely forced me to step forward, right? And stepped aside. And it was a gradual way of doing it. And I think and I've always I talk to recruiting leaders about this all the time, and it's really hard because you don't get to choose your boss. But there is that, right? There's always that age-old tale of recruiting and HR, or the recruiters don't want to report to an HR leader who doesn't know anything about recruiting. And, it's just, and I've been there.
That was me.
Yes. And I've had to leave, right, companies because of it. And so to have a real partnership and to be two in a box like that is just going to make your organization so much stronger, especially when recruiting is the most important thing, which when you're scaling a company, I would argue it is. It's the focus. Everyone knew who I was. For a while, not everyone knew Kelly, but they knew who I was.
Yeah.
Right? So.
It's a great segue. I'll put a bookend on it with Kelly's throwing you into the deep end of the pool with some floaties on. Right?
Yeah. Or maybe one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll find the other one. Yeah, you'll be fine.
Right. Exactly.
There was always a life preserver waiting. It just didn't have to be used. Hey, everyone. We'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
There's a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and deeply intuitive. Attio makes that a reality. Attio is a radically new CRM built specifically for the new era of companies. It's flexible, easily configures to your unique data structures, works for any go-to-market motion from self-serve to sales-led. Attio automatically enriches your contacts, syncs your emails and calendar, lets you create powerful reports, and quickly build Zapier-style automations. The next era of companies deserves more than a one-size-fits-all CRM with an outdated UX. Join OpenAI, Replicate, 11 Labs, and more. Try Attio instantly at attio.com. That's ATTIO.com, and tell them Nolan and Kelli from HR Heretics sent you. All right. Yeah. So JR, the moment we're in right now, it's about to be March of 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Tech is still going through a bloodbath as it relates to layoffs, but you work at Pendo. You're the chief people officer at Pendo, and Pendo is growing and hiring.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I get pinged about 3 to 4 times a week is people saying, how do I get a job right now? And it's coming from, I think, 2 angles. One angle is like the new grad from college. The other
Mm-hmm.
angle is I got laid off from a startup that I thought was going to be doing a lot better that unfortunately is not. So
Yep.
talk to me about how you're evaluating candidates today, how you think these people can get a foot in the door, and what's changed, from the last 5 years.
Yes, certainly. We are hiring. And at the same time, right, it's intensely competitive then still, because depending on the role, right, if there are roles where there isn't a lot of talent on the market, then it's incredibly competitive for us. We're competing with other people trying to pull top talent from companies. If it's roles where there has been a lot of layoffs concentrated, we have a lot of really high quality candidates. And that just makes it even harder. And it makes it harder on the recruiting team because then the noise level is higher too, right? Because there's quality in that inbound funnel. Like I've heard some people say that that's not worth it. And I would say that that's patently false. There always is quality. You just have to find a way to get to it.
Especially when you have a brand like Pendo.
Yeah. And people want to come work there. Customers love
That's
us,
what I mean.
right?
Yep.
People love the brand. They want to work for us. So they think that, hey, I'm going to apply and that's going to work. And, I believe that it should, right? I am not a fan of the black hole. That should work, right? You show interest, you should have that chance to get the opportunity. Now, I tell people really simple things. I forget, it's tailoring tailor your resume. Use AI if you want to do it now. I don't care. It's available to you. Be smart, right? But make your resume match the job description. Help your chances of getting through the filter. Make a connection into the company if you can, right? A quality connection. Ask for someone to refer you if you have an inroad there. That helps all the time. And just know that you have to absolutely positively be prepared, right? And do research and know who you're talking to, every person, right? Absolutely follow up, send LinkedIn connections, thank you notes, anything you can do to set yourself apart and show that you care and you want the job. And here's why you are the person for the role, and be very direct about it as far as I'm concerned. Right? You have to get people's attention. You have to advocate for yourself. And then know, even if you get through, the bar is high, right? We still have a CEO who reviews all offers. And it's a part of it. It's way better than where it was when I got there and he was interviewing everyone.
We talked about this, Nolan, with LJ, right?
I'm a big fan of that.
And
I think that's great.
He's intensely focused on talent. How can I be upset about that? Right? Not at all. Bring it. I welcome it. We have a lot of really good conversations. Sometimes we argue, right? Whatever it might be. But he said, you send me an offer, I'm going to read everything. I'm going to read the scorecards. I'm going to read, right? He wants to make sure that everyone cares as much as he does. Yeah. And sometimes you might get all the way through to that and that offer doesn't go through. And that really sucks. It sucks for the recruiting team. It sucks for the candidate, right? And we're in, those moments again right now. And it's a good reminder because we haven't been hiring at the velocity that we were. And people do get a little rusty, right? We see some of our hiring managers or interviewers not being as rigorous maybe as they should be.
Interesting.
And you can't argue. I mean, it's not their fault. They're not doing it on purpose, right? They're just out of they've been shipping product for a year and a half. We haven't had a lot of attrition in some areas, right? It's kind of like they got to get back on the bike and everyone's got to get back on their toes again.
All right. So, I want to start at the end of the funnel. So you just mentioned something really interesting, which is Todd reviews every offer. Todd's the CEO of Pendo. I love that. Tony actually, I think, still does it now at DoorDash. He definitely did it through about 5,000 employees. Why is he blocking offers? What are examples of reasons why?
Yeah, and it's very rare, I would say very rare. And I think what he'll do is question, right? He will question, right? And he does a really good job now. And I said, hey, if you listen to how we talk about recruiting, I don't need you to go to the recruiter. I need you to go to the hiring manager or the hiring leader, right? That's who you need to go to about this. This is their hire. We are facilitating this process, right? And doing this. And it's a partnership. But in the end game, they are making the choice and they are saying, I want to hire this person for my team. And so the question needs to go there, right? And what will help, right, with whatever is happening. I do think, like I said, our attrition's been fairly decent. Benchmarks all aligned, like some areas more or less than others, depending on the market. And we aren't going to hire that much. We're growing, right? So we'll add a lot of new sales folks. We'll add some support here and there, and we'll backfill folks who leave on key roles and things like that. But that just makes every hire, instead of hiring 200 people a quarter, we may hire 50. And every one of those then is going to get even more scrutiny than when it was 200. He's
going to give the proctology exam, which I'm very familiar with. But like, what's an example recently of where he blocked? Like, is it because scorecards are not filled out? Is it because like there's a gap on the resume? Like, what's Todd's thing? Because every CEO usually has like a thing. Tony's thing was like job hoppiness. He hated when there would be, out of 4, if 4 is like a strong yes, like a bunch of 3s and like nobody pounding the table. Tony's whole thing was like, I want somebody to put their badge on the line for this hire.
Yep.
So what's Todd's thing?
First of all, my recruiting team, right? And some of those folks have worked for me now, again, for 7 or 8 years or at 2 or 3 different companies. There will never be an incomplete scorecard. There will never be job hoppiness without a note explaining what is going on. I mean, they are on it, and I'm on
the sales side now, and these sales leaders are like, "You got to do the scorecards. You got to do the scorecards." It's incredible.
I mean, yeah, Barack, Shannon, and my recruiters are coming for you. Do you know what I mean? They're like, "No, we're not putting it through." Like, tough. And so it's not that. I think what it comes down to, and sometimes the recruiting team then can't necessarily catch it, is maybe it's in the interviews that are more technical, right? Or more on, whatever it is about the selling or, I think it's that. I think it is what you said about Tony. It is the pounding on the table. Where is my strong yes? Where is someone saying, we must hire this person. They are going to be a 10X employee. They are going to make a difference at Pendo. And so I think everyone in the company just needs to get back on that bike and get back in the mode. And sometimes I think this is his way of reminding us of that. And like I said, the timing isn't always ideal, but I said to someone, I'd rather have a bad Glassdoor review than a bad hire. It's cheaper.
Yeah. Nolan, yesterday on our segment, we talked about this notion of nodes of influence within a company and folks that leaders respect. And that is something I've seen too. If Todd will go through, especially in companies that are sub 1,000 people and you still have relationships and they're star performers, if Todd will go through, for example, and he'll say, oh, Sally is a star and she's a 2. Well, that's interesting. Like, that is also something that will raise flags around, you're going to hire this person, someone that is very, very influential and great. This company does not think we should.
Yeah.
Let's take a beat and make sure. And I do applaud the whole thing. And I know what people say, hey, you can't scale it. You can. I mean, maybe it's not every offer at some point. Maybe it's a sampling. But I will tell you, the accountability that puts in the system is real. And we've all been at companies where CEOs, their hands off the wheel, people are just doing whatever they fucking want. The place becomes fat and average. And then you got to do riffs. It's not going to work for it's not 100% foolproof, right? But it does work. And it's much more painful to have a fat and average company than to have a proctology exam.
JR, I do want to get your take on how you have scaled the recruiting team and the procedures on the recruiting team. So like the things I think about with interviewer training. And when you are growing and scaling, now a bunch of new hires are talking to candidates, which is a little bit scary. So talk to me about like the procedures that you have in place and then also the checks and balances to ensure that you guys are keeping the quality bar very high.
And wrapped around that, JR, I'd love the audience to hear, because you are probably the best I've seen in the business of running this thing like a business. It is not a process. It is not operational. You literally talk to the company about the recruiting business, and just how that works in your brain, because it's magical and I still haven't really unpacked it.
Yeah, I mean, so I think first and foremost, I'm lucky in the sense that like I have a business or operator background and became a recruiter like most people do, sort of by accident or happenstance. And so everything I think about, and in my job before, I was a buyer for retail stores, which is a fair amount of a mix. Like I think recruiting is of like art and science. Everything comes back down to math. When it really matters, there's always math at the heart of a lot of things. And at the same time, then you have to be able to be creative and trust your gut and do right the things that set us apart, I think, as great recruiting leaders. But the foundations and the fundamentals of understanding the business, speaking the language of the business. And Nolan, on the question of scaling a team, I wasn't sure how to do that in a startup setting because I had worked in big companies. And I honestly leaned on the talent partners from our VCs and resources that were out there, right? The Sequoia had a calculator or something, right? These things that people might think, I used all of that at Looker, right, to help build a business case and speak the language that my CFO would understand. And as soon as we agreed upon a capacity model and a general model for how we were going to grow the team, I never had any trouble, right, being able to get resources or prove what was needed. It was already the wheels were greased and we just had to go and find the best people. And my advice there then is if someone is out there as a TA leader looking for a new opportunity, when I did that after the conversation with Todd, and then I spoke to the CFO, Jennifer is her name as well. We go by initials. So I'm JR and she's JK. We kind of look alike too. People confuse us all the time, especially when I travel to other offices. She said, well, we need to grow the company by this amount, like Kelly said. If you come, I will tell the board that we can hit those numbers, right? And I said, okay, and did some quick math, literally by hand. And I was like, tell me the numbers you need to hire. I wrote them down to it. And I said, okay, well, I need 20 people and $2 million, right? And she's like, okay, right? And built that into the plan and budget. But you have to know that, because what if you get somewhere and then they're like, you gotta scale and you gotta hire, but you can't add to your team. And no, there's no money for agencies. And no, there's no money to get any technology. I mean, you're completely screwed, right? In that sense, you have to find a foundational model for what that looks like. And I did not know. Yeah.
Why do you think this is not like table stakes for every TA leader? You say it seems to make so much sense. And I don't see it out there. I have not seen this mindset out there. What is going on?
I think everyone is so focused on, filling recs, right? And how many recs I have, or just focused on that. Like even, coming from a bigger company, right? Like even my early recruiting things, like I wasn't thinking beyond that. I knew when I would get uncomfortable or what was untenable from how many recs I could carry or what would make me successful or not. But I was never thinking of it in that broader view, right? Because that wasn't the view that I had for the company. So that's why. And I do think so. If people promote someone who's really just been a recruiter to some degree into the role, they're not going to have the skill set. Anyone who hasn't done the recruiting operations role, which I was lucky enough to do at Apple, to coordinate between both corporate and retail recruiting, so both high volume and then corporate recruiting, and learn all of the things about career sites and applicant tracking and compliance and background checks and just all these nuts and bolts. If I hadn't have done that job, I would have never been prepared to be right ahead of recruiting. And I think so many folks are just not, right? They might be a good recruiter, but they don't know the fundamentals. It's a huge cost center when it comes down to it. But we spend a lot of money. I think we spent $1 million recruiting for the first Apple store in Japan. No lie, like $1 million just to hire people for that store. Not counting their salaries. I'm talking about just what it took to do that. And so at that point, that's a huge part of my budget for an entire year at Pendo, right? So I think it comes down to that.
I personally had to unlearn the like focusing on recs. Like I think that's the hardest part of the transition from IC recruiter to recruiting leader is like you're just trained on recs. Given the moment we're in right now, to where there's not as many jobs open as there were in the past, how are you thinking about quality and the quality bar, like specifically with your recruiting team and working with them on that?
Yeah, again, I've been fortunate. I have a really strong team, a fairly senior team, I would say, who has seen, I think we joke around. I think my go-to-market recruiting team has like 150 years of recruiting experience, right? It's like 6 of them or something, right? It is enormous. And they've recruited at large companies, small companies, startups, things that were successful, things that failed. Their innate understanding of the business and their roles, meaning like my enterprise sales recruiters can talk to anyone about sales comp structures or any complicated like ramp times and how are we going to know early indicators. Like
I love that.
Absolute ninjas, right? When it comes to that. And the same for my engineering recruiters as well. And it's just one of those things where their bars are inherently really high. And then when you work for a company, and at Looker, it was really hard to get a job at Looker, right? And the data and analytics piece played a role in that. Like you had to actually be a data person and know how to write SQL and do all these things. And then we would teach you how to be a sales engineer, or we'd teach you how to sell, or we'd teach you how to service customers. And that was after trial and error, but they figured that out. If we continue to hire really smart data people who actually then want to be public, some don't want to be, they want to be back doing back office type things, which is fine too. There's roles for that. But those who wanted to be out in front of customers and cared did that. At Pendo, it's similar, right? Like the people love Pendo. They want to be a part of it. So there's a lot of interest, and especially when it comes to product management, engineering, whatever it might be, and it's not an easy product to sell. This is not some simple right app. And so that, though inherently having a complex technology product, recruiters that are really experienced, and teams that just care, right? That keeps the quality bar really high in my estimation, right?
It seems like your recruiters are in there though too. Like they're in with the business. Like when you say that they know ramp times, comp plans, like it seems like they're actually like much more integrated into the business partnership aspect. Like people say business partnership and I roll my eyes because it's such an overused fucking phrase. But the thing it really means is like, you know what the business is doing. Like you can speak the language of the business. And the only way you get to that level is by actually like sitting with them and understanding what they do on a day in and day out basis.
Nolan, these recruiters, and this is pro tip and something that JR just so freaking well, they present along with the HR business partner at leadership QBRs for that business. That they are on the hook for quarterly business reviews, presenting not just the recruiting side and the rec, literally how they're running the recruiting side with the organizational side together. Pro tip, JR and I's relationship, like it is one business connected and they're on the hook to do that. I mean, that is something I have rarely seen. And
totally. It's usually like separate. It's like the body is not connected and it should just be like one body. And you have these recruiters who are recruiting for roles who have no idea what actually like those people do in that job. And that's where I think quality gets really tough.
Yep.
Yes.
Is because it's just like you're just shooting in the dark and you're going back to all the resume biases that like have existed forever.
And not only is and not only is the body not connected, it's like fighting with each other. Like it's even worse than not being connected. It's like and when you can flip that switch, it's magical what you can accomplish as a force in any business. JR, I have a question. In-house recruiting versus the agency stuff. In my time in doing this over the years, I've just heard so many different opinions, so many points of view. I've been in companies where the leader's like, fuck you, I'm bringing in my own recruiter and agency. We're only working with them. You can't really do anything, or can you? Like, how do you balance all that? And you do it really well as far as leveraging agencies and not having them ruin things also, while setting expectations and boundaries with the business leaders. And how does that all work?
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
It is, and it's expensive, and it can be disruptive, but also at the same time, it can be amazing. And some agency recruiters, at the executive level, are some of my best friends in the business, right, to this day, that I've known for years and that I trust implicitly. And I am purely an in-house recruiter. I spent about 3 months trying to go external, and it was like organ rejection from day one. Like, it was not the right thing for me. In any stretch. So at least I gave it a try, though. So I'm like, oh, well, I can do that, and I get all this feedback. And then I just realized I didn't like it, right? I need to be a part of a culture and a mission and believe in something and run a team with that. So, however, I find, for those who don't like agencies or external, right? Like, I think they are a necessary evil if we were going to coin that phrase. But I've always said, hey, I think there's probably 3 or 4 situations only that you ever use an agency in. One is if it's just such a niche role that you don't have the skill set on your recruiting team, and it's going to be completely disruptive to the business and to their workload. So there's one, right? The second is you're going into a new geography. You don't speak the language. You don't know anything about it. You don't have a recruiter there, whatever that might be. Absolutely, positively, that is the right place to go. I think that the third is supplemental. Like, if you are in a huge push and you have to add capacity very quickly, there can be some specialized recruiters. There's some, like in the sales world, where we've carved out a territory or a region so that we don't cross hairs and say, hey, Jennifer Bell, you're recruiting for the Midwest, right, for us, and putting enterprise recs in there. That's rare, but it's usually during times. And then no doubt at the C level, absolutely, positively, I believe that there should always be an agency involved, unless you already know someone. And and I was just having this conversation with Elizabeth Patterson at Sapphire yesterday, who I know was a guest on an earlier episode, and I've known her for years as well, and saying, you get so much more from a really good executive search firm than just candidates. You're learning about the market. You're learning about comp. You're getting a survey of the industry. If they're really, really good, you are getting in-depth analysis of what's happening in that, space and why you're seeing certain things. So you're paying for so much more than a list of qualified candidates.
Those are such great points. Yeah. I just want to accent that. I've rarely heard people think about it like that. And to the point of relationships, now you have that person. You can go get lunch for free 8 months later and learn new things.
They're texting all the time, and recruiters do that. Nolan knows that. Like, recruiters, it's okay if I haven't talked to you in 5 years and the first thing I text you about is I need a favor. Like, recruiters don't get pissed. They're just like, okay, yeah, what? Do you know what I mean? What do you need? And then you kind of come around, but like, that's our quid pro quo, no matter what, right? And then we, like, oh my gosh, I haven't spoken to that person and, since Yahoo or something, but we're still like great friends. You just, you're not
totally
in the trenches together.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of the big agencies that I've worked with. At big companies, it's okay. Right. I think it was okay. I had some really good relationships back in the day at Yahoo with Heidrick and some other firms that I really enjoyed. Now I tend to go towards the more boutique, independent, or smaller people who absolutely positively specialize, right? They only do CROs. They only do CMOs, right? And they are the person working on the search for you. It's not a lower level associate or whatever that might be. And what I try to bring to it, because I was an executive recruiter, is you get this partnership, right, where they are bringing this external view of the market, and I am giving them the inside baseball look into the company. I am telling them things that they would never know, not non-confidential stuff, but like, do not step on this landmine, right? Here's what this person is like. Here was everything that was wrong with the last person that was in the job, right here. And we combine to make a very powerful force. And that's why they're still some of my best friends, is because, in some ways we help each other, right? We make it that much more. It's like a hybrid extension of each other, right? And if I have the bandwidth to do it. Now that I'm chief people officer, my ability to do that as much isn't there as when I was the head of recruiting, but I still do play a big role in it.
That is so well said. And that is the perfect description of what the partnership should look like. I'm hearing a lot of CEOs right now say, hey, I don't want to use executive recruiting because it's too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's fair. I mean, it is very expensive. These searches are in the $100,000 plus range. Sometimes they include equity. And that is a tough pill to swallow. But the whole idea is if you can coordinate and get it right, and the external recruiter is coming with the market intelligence and the network, and you're coming with the internal intelligence, like these are the sacred cows, these are where the bodies are buried, this is where the last person didn't work. Getting that hire right is so important. And in my opinion, I've gone back and forth on this. I think it's totally worth it to spend the money, because if you get it wrong, it's going to be way more expensive for the business.
No, it is. And I think there's a way to get out in front of it. And I've learned the hard way as well. But you have to look, we have an attrition rate, right, that we apply to the company and we make a plan. You look at your attrition at the VP level, look at your attrition at the C level, plan for it. You know, I will say to my finance team, I need $250,000 next year to space out in case, you know, a couple of VPs or a C-level person decides to leave.
That's
someone flames out, wasn't a bad hire. You have to budget for it. If you end up giving the money back, all the better, right? You know, you're helping the bottom line, but you should never go into a new year without budgeting, you know, for agencies, whether it's the folks. I do the same thing. We have people in Japan. I don't speak Japanese. We don't speak Japanese.
Yeah.
So I look at that team, I apply an attrition rate, and I take that times a third of the salary, or the average salary of who we're going to have to hire, and we put it in the budget, right? You have to do it, or else you're going to be caught short.
Yeah. And that's what, and then you're playing from behind, and then you're asking for things mid-year, and everybody hates you, especially your CFO. You just mentioned something that me and Kelly haven't talked a lot about, which is succession planning. How are you guys thinking about that? And how do you and Todd play together on succession planning? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, we just, you know, really had some in terms of really putting it into play, meaning like I was able to step in as Kelly was, you know, exploring doing new things and doing amazing. Our co-founder CTO is still co-founder CTO, but he does not manage any people. Right. And so we have the head of engineering who stepped up and moved into the C-suite this year as well. We had a new CRO this year. So you get a fair amount of a C-suite that is, you know, new in seat and a new team kind of blending together. So at our latest talent review, we did have a fairly robust conversation around potential successors and succession planning, and really focusing it on our successors. Now I'm, you know, a few years out probably from needing that, but have a plan, right?
Yeah.
And I'm starting to think about what that looks like and speaking about it candidly. And then there are some that are going to be closer than others that we're already actively planning for and talking about right now. So I think that we haven't maybe always done the best job there, but because of changes to the business, we actually made the C-suite a little bit smaller recently. It's been a good time in the time frame where things kind of got tough and slowed down, and we weren't so hyper focused on that we were focused more on how are we going to keep our best people here. It's a huge initiative for us this year, identifying our top performers and figuring out how to provide opportunities for them to learn and earn and network and do these things, at the same time being very realistic that if people are going to leave, right? I've had a conversation yesterday with a leader and said, all I ask is that you know, if you feel comfortable, let me know. Give me enough lead time. I'm not going to tell. I will not. If you tell me not to tell anyone, I won't tell anyone. But guess what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to start planning. We're going to start getting things in motion until I'm going to tell them, now you have to tell someone, right? But like that trust that I feel like I have built with the company, hopefully, and that, you know, Kelly has laid the groundwork for, is that our leaders do tend to confide in the people team and say, hey, I'm thinking about maybe leaving or making a change. Will you help me? Right? Or what does that look like? Here's what I think it does for the organization. Here's my thoughts. Right. And
you know,
we've really built that trust up.
Yeah, for sure. I think, Nolan and JR, there is a very strong correlation between a company's culture and your ability to succession plan very well in the C team. And when I say that, I mean, it's not rocket science, but if the C team trusts the CEO or their chief people officer and vice versa, you can be honest about these things and you can have a lot of runway for planning. And I have seen more so that an executive is scared to say this because they feel like they're going to get ousted and screwed. And the CEO is scared on the other side to tell the person they're not working out because they don't like conflict. They don't want to disrupt the business. They want to recruit in secret. The more that you can get this out earlier and make it okay to freaking do that, the easier this becomes. Like I talked to Todd 8 months before I left the role, but that's not always there. And it just breaks my heart because ultimately it impacts the business. And higher the trust factor, the easier the succession planning is, the better for the top and bottom line.
What's the magic behind? Okay, so I'm with you. My biggest pet peeve is when an executive puts in notice, hasn't given us a time frame that's beyond like a couple of weeks. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, why can't we just be adults? So what is the secret sauce behind doing it well?
Yeah, I mean, it is tough because I would be like, I'd be lying to say that doesn't happen, because it does. Right. And we have experienced it. Right. And I guess I always have to step back sometimes and say, okay, what's going on in that relationship perhaps, right? Maybe I need to take a look at what's happening there. Or maybe you already know that, oh, okay, that's not surprising. And so I pride us and our team on having our finger on the pulse in a pretty decent way, that we tend not to be surprised very often, meaning like we can either see the signals or someone has been. But it's been a lot of hard work, right? We've been through some tough times, as a company, even in the past few years, and role eliminations, but that's also allowed these leaders and the people team to work really closely together on some really hard stuff and build up their own trust and foundations. But letting us know early, right? We had an empty seat for a while in the C team. It hurt. It hurt the company really bad, right? And you can quantify that, right? Because it was a cumulative effect then that didn't have to happen. And whatever the situation might be, whether we're actually managing someone out of the company, right, or they're choosing to leave, the ability to be upfront about it then allows us to plan and have a search and have that gap be very short, right? Like, or if at all. Right. That's ideal. There's always probably going to be some kind of a gap, but like, I can't stress enough. We know these executive searches take 6 months, 9 months, right? It's not going to be a 90-day fill, right? That's not going to happen. So we need to like back out and be planning for that.
My hot take, Nolan, what is that secret sauce? I agree with everything JR said. And just to keep it real simple and spicy, the secret sauce is to try and eliminate all aspects of fear around this as much as you can. And that fear is usually based on probably real events and trauma of someone getting screwed over because they tried to communicate,
or watching their friend get screwed over,
or watching someone else, or hearing about it. That is fear. And I felt this too. You probably have too. Fear of that leader losing people they don't want to lose. So they don't want to talk about it. If we're not talking about it, it's not real. Like if JR and I aren't talking about when she's going to leave, she's not going to leave. So we're not going to talk about it until one day when she puts in her 3-week notice. And I'm like, fuck. And I do believe this fear is the root cause. And I think if you can work to eliminate that through trust and just talking out loud about it and promising that you're not going to get screwed over if you talk about this. Like that is the way to do it.
Yeah. Kelli, I've thought a lot about this because it has happened to me. And when I reflected on it, it was my fault. Like I did not do a good job telling that person that they would not get walked out, that my expectation was, we have a great relationship. I will never be mad at you if you decide you want to leave. And I think just like that conversation, once every 3 to 6 months as a reminder is like all you need to do to build at least the foundation of trust, which is the thing. Is like, you're right. People are scared because people do get walked out. Some CEOs and leadership teams are punitive.
Yes.
And we'll be like, oh, if you're not with me, you're against me. I've heard that before. And those things do exist. And I think people carry that baggage with them into new companies. But the thing I've learned from this conversation is it works really well when you have trust and relationships.
Yeah.
and you can have that as the foundation, and then it can be healthy transitions versus like these shitty transitions that hurt the company and hurt the people involved.
And I don't want to like present duckies and rainbows and everything is wonderful, because sometimes it's just not fucking possible. And I think there is a correlation between the ego and or insecurity of a leader and their ability to be able to do that. And sometimes it's not possible. So I'm not advocating that everyone go out and say, hey, JR, let's build trust. I'm going to leave in 9 months. Like sometimes, please, you know, and so use people you trust, talk to people, etc. But I just want to be realistic as well, because I have seen CEOs on the other side.
Yep. Yeah.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Katie, anything else from you?
Yeah, I have one more question. There's a lot of people that listen to this podcast, which is great. Thank you for all of them. And the diversity of our listeners is increasing, right? CEO, founders, venture, different business leaders. I joke we should slash the term HR on this and just call it Heretics. And they want to know what makes a great company. You know, you've been at these magical places, Looker, Pendo, and it's kind of maybe a nebulous question, hard to answer, but like, what is it like in there living with those people? Like, what are those strange creatures like? How do they communicate? How do they work? What is the vibe and the disposition of these places that make these places fucking awesome? And how is it different from others that you've seen? Because that's something, playbooks, this or that, but what are the creatures like, and how do they like communicate, work together?
Yeah. You know, I think I've been lucky and then smart about working at companies with, you know, even back in the day, 20 years ago, talking about culture and what culture means, right? And I was a consumer gal, you know what I mean, for years. When you're a recruiter and you're calling and you say, this is JR from Apple, they're going to take your call. This is JR from Target, right? This is JR from Yahoo or Google, like whatever it might be. And there's that brand affinity, and it's out in the world, and it stands for something and believe in it, right? And there's all these really strong cultures. So when it was brought to me to like go to an enterprise software company, first I was like, I don't get it, right? Like, you know, most software I use at work, I hate. I mean, you know, we're talking like over 10 years ago now, but like, how do people care? What is this all about, right? Am I the right person? Because I don't think I get it. Like I need a brand, I need a product, I need something, right? And I mean, like that people know. So before I went to Looker, the other job offer I had was to go be an executive recruiter for Elon at Tesla, right? And I turned it down. And I went to this whole idea of like, can I give myself permission to take the job that I really want versus the job that everyone else thinks I should take, right? Or everyone else has heard of, or my parents know who it is, right? What that looks like. For me, I'd already worked for Steve Jobs for real, right? And so like I didn't need to go prove something and go work for Elon and, you know, and whatever that meant. And so I went to Looker and I asked Frank, the CEO, and Ben and Lloyd, the co-founders, because, you know, they knew my background. And I said, help me understand, how am I going to relate here? How am I going to understand what this is about? And I think Lloyd probably got it right away, right? You know what I mean? He was the one who was like, you know, it's the people, right? It is how we treat people. It is their shared mission. It's how they're smart. They care about each other, right? They are, you know, we had the kitchen table at Looker where anyone could sit down. It's very inclusive. Everyone is welcome. No stupid questions, right? It was this, you know, magical place where people genuinely liked and wanted to help each other. And it was a hard place to work because, boy, if you didn't know your stuff, you were going to be lost and left behind pretty quickly, right? So it was like a great merry band of data nerds who are like surfing before work and going through, you know, 100 pounds of avocados every week. So it was amazing. And it was about the place too. And I think Pendo is like that. So Looker was a lot about Santa Cruz and the ethos of that lifestyle, right? And then when we looked at Pendo, I was like, I really want to work for a company that isn't headquartered in Silicon Valley. I want to know what that's all about, right? They have grown this amazing tech company in North Carolina, right? Which we know has a history of kind of older school tech as well. But like, what is this going to be like? And, you know, what I found, I mean, you go to Raleigh, North Carolina, downtown. There is this now big building, pink on top. It says Pendo, right? It is amazing. Everyone is proud to work there. Everyone knows it's like the bigger fish in a smaller pond. Todd's kind of a local celebrity. Can't even go eat at some restaurants, and things like that. But it is this sort of shared love of the brand. And that comes down to, it comes through in the work. And that's what I got, meaning like both at Looker and at Pendo. We love our customers. We have a maniacal focus on the customer, or like we Department of Customer Love. These people would do anything for the customer. And then that means they have to work together. They have to collaborate, and customers love us. So even if they've got a bug, something isn't working, they're on the support line. Like, they're so thrilled with the experience that they have with their rep or their person who's helping them. And that just comes through, right? And that begets that. Like, so you feel the goodness of it in that sense. And so I think that there has to be that passion about something, whether it's product excellence at Apple, whether it's the ethos of Google and of Yahoo, or then at these smaller companies, right? There has to be something that holds everyone together. And that's what I think makes those things special. And I can get behind that, and I can sell that, even if I don't even understand what the product does.
And I'm taking
right?
away
Or
that
I
you can
use
actually ask that. You can ask those questions and discern
Yeah.
that, which is
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah.
And then if you have a founder, CEO, leader that wants to continue to grow and invest in it, that's another good signal.
Absolutely. Right. And investors who believe in you. Just had our investors on stage at CKO, our 4 earliest investors. It's a who's who of Meritech and Battery and, Megan Quinn. And it was just, it's an amazing group. And they were talking about why they believe in Pendo and why they believe about the future of Pendo. And it got the company, people just were like, oh, they needed to hear that from outside, right? They hear it from us so much.
Yeah, for sure.
But getting that from outside and from people that are really well known in that community and who have millions of dollars invested in the company, it was really, really cool.
I love that.
Love it.
JR, this has been tremendous. Thanks so much for the time. We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thanks,
Loved
guys.
it. Thank you so much.
HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment is Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.